I'm sure you watch great jazz guitarists and listen to all the great music. And of course, you also want to play like that, enjoy improvising over songs and using those beautiful chords. But you need to practice to learn that. And jazz guitar isn't easy. To help you enjoy the journey of learning jazz, I'm gonna show you 7 common excuses that can block your progress by ruining your motivation. And there are certainly a few that I've run into myself, but I'll talk about that as well. I'm too old to learn this. Now, this is something that I come across in 2 different variations, and both are definitely not going to get you anywhere, but I think the second one is actually the biggest problem. The first variation is just giving up. I'll see comments saying, I don't want to practice, I'm too old to learn new things. And of course, it's true that it gets more difficult to learn as we get older, but the brain does actually keep learning our entire life. And I think the biggest factor is that you're not in the habit of learning, but habits are something that you can build. And if you dream about playing jazz, then you can learn at any age. Remember that you will get faster at learning as you spend time on it. I've seen this many times, both in my roadmap course and on Patreon. What is much more important is that you find a way to learn that you enjoy. It's about the journey, not the destination when it comes to music. I still practice learning new things little by little each day, and I'm sure I wouldn't do that if I didn't enjoy practicing. The other variation of this is I'm too old to learn, so I don't want to play solos and I just want to play chords and chord melody. The problem here is that you end up skipping things that you will need when playing chords and chord melody. A huge part of learning jazz is about training your ears for the right type of melodies and the right types of phrasing and rhythm. And that's just 1,000 times easier to learn when you're playing only 1 note at a time, not 4 or 5 note chords. So refusing to learn any soloing, any scales, or any melodies is just gonna slow you down. I've said it before, but I'm sure you realize that Joe Pass did not start by learning the things he's playing on his solo albums. So find a balanced practice routine and enjoy learning jazz no matter your age. And as I will talk about later, talent is also not the biggest factor, which I actually think is a good thing. I don't have enough time to practice. The one thing that none of us have enough of is time. With work, studying, family, it can be hard to find time to practice guitar. And often that means giving up or not starting at all, but maybe that's more about planning and expectations. Plus that you often forget that there's actually one way of practicing that's pretty easy to fit in almost everywhere. When you plan your practice, then try to pay attention to these 3 things. Practical sessions. You will get frustrated if you start by trying to block several hours every day to practice, simply because it's unrealistic. And even if you find the time, you don't have the energy and the focus to practice for that long. You're just setting yourself up to fail. In that respect, I think it's much more efficient to only aim for short practice sessions like 15 or 20 minutes. If it's short, then it's easier to fit in. And if you practice longer, then that feels like a victory instead of always practicing less than you were hoping and get frustrated. Another thing you want to make a priority is that you enjoy practicing. So mix things that you like to work on with the things that you need to work on, and make the practice time something that you look forward to doing. Realistic goals are also important with this, so watch out that you don't expect to be the next Wes Montgomery after practicing daily for 3 weeks. In fact, your goals should really just be more about things that you want to improve in your playing, not comparing yourself to someone who defined the genre or has decades of experience. Now, the bonus tip here, and I think this is really underrated, is that a practice activity that is pretty easy to fit in and doesn't even require you to play guitar is listening to jazz. So don't underestimate how much you will learn by listening to jazz while you are traveling to work, walking the dog, cooking, working out, whatever you do, listen to jazz. Jazz is often connected to certain types of guitars and certain types of amps, and I have run into that in a few different ways. When I did my audition at the Royal Conservatory in The Hague, I was told that I was accepted, that I was really playing jazz, but I still had a lot to learn, and that they would help me get a loan to get a real jazz guitar since I was playing a Stratocaster. That's of course nonsense. In fact, one of my teachers at the school, Ave Albers, also plays a Stratocaster. There is no real jazz guitar, and you can easily play jazz on any guitar that you want to. Just listen to Ed Bickert using a Telecaster, or that Joe Pass video where he's playing a Jaguar or a Jazzmaster, whatever guitar that is. You want to play jazz? Go for it. Think about the music. You can worry about gear later. If you want to see just how little it matters, then I'll link to a video in the description that compares my guitars and nobody can tell the difference. The other way around is of course also possible. You start learning jazz because you want a new guitar, but then that's not an excuse for learning jazz. Let me know what you think and if I missed something that you hear used as an excuse. Jazz is too complicated. Now it's funny because jazz isn't actually as complicated as people say it is, and it's also the fact that it's complicated that is the reason why some people are drawn to it. I think a huge part of the problem here is the way jazz is often taught, with a lot of information up front and then a very long road to put that into music. Now, I often compare music to a language, and you don't learn a language by first memorizing a dictionary. And the same is of course true for music. That's just outdated teaching from the 70s, or maybe it's just bad teaching. You can learn jazz without a million scales, and you can start with real music. It's about learning to make it sound like jazz. And that's also what I cover in my jazz guitar roadmap course, without using hypochondrian flat six or retrophonic arpeggio pairs. It doesn't have to be complicated. The basic concept that works for most things in music is to start with the overview and then add detail along the way. And this also works for most things in jazz. I can't afford lessons. This is not as big of a problem as it used to be. Of course, if you can take real in-person lessons, then that is the most efficient way to learn. You have someone help you learn the right things in the right order and give you feedback on how you're doing. But if that's not an option, then you are kind of in luck if you compare now to how it was when I started playing jazz, which is, I guess, over 25 years ago. Because now you have a lot of options with free online material that you can use. It's not as efficient as lessons that are tailor-made for you, but you can still get a lot further. And there are options like courses that are a lot cheaper than one-on-one lessons that you can upgrade to once you feel it's worth it. Just get started and learn some songs. I think talent is overrated. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist or that it is an advantage to have talent, but when you're learning jazz, then thinking about whether you have talent or not is not very useful. When I worked at the young talent department at the conservatory, then what I saw was that the most important talent that a student could have was the ability to work and study, almost to the point of talent working against some of the students. And that's kind of also how I remember my own study. The students who practiced and worked got better, and effort was just worth more than talent. Now, when it comes to learning, then if you think you have no talent and you think that you need to be talented, well, then that means that the only thing you can do is give up. And surely it's just a lot better to try to get as good as you can and enjoy playing the music, not wonder about some magic gift you may or may not have. You also want to remember that playing music has a lot of different sides and nobody is talented with everything. Ironically, thinking you're talented can actually also work against you because it stops you from realizing that there are things that you need to learn. You don't need to learn anything. You have talent. So don't worry about talent. Just have fun, keep playing and keep learning. I'm curious what you guys think, because I do sometimes get angry comments when I talk about how talent isn't very helpful for learning. But at least I know that my biggest talent is that I know how to work. I don't know where to start. So I talked a bit about this earlier, and it is very important that you don't drown yourself in technical exercises and theory, but instead find some simple songs and focus on learning them and playing them, making music, even making it a bit simpler, because you can add detail along the way. But you do, of course, need to check out some scales and arpeggios. Just don't make it too complicated. And there is a practical and efficient way to do this. And it also fits with how you want to use scales and arpeggios and solos. And I talk about that in this video, which is essential for understanding how arpeggios and scales fit together, and also gives you an approach to improvise and start playing solos that actually sound like jazz using that material. Check it out.